Tonight on Zebra Spotlight, we have an amazing guest. I'm truly honored. If you guys loved Dune, Mad Max Fury Road, Blade Runner 2049, Aladdin, you'll notice that the sound design was just fantastic, some of these films. We have in our company none other than Mark Mangini, award-winning sound designer and re-recording mixer, from Los Angeles. Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's a joy to be here. I'm always honored because I look forward to any opportunity to speak about the importance of sound in cinema and in all, for that matter, all narrative entertainment, and to kind of proselytize and hopefully educate people on how important sound is in storytelling. That's my goal.
Now, we'll come on to the educational aspects in due course, but first of all, I mean, we've done a Q&A together. You can read the Q&A on my website. What a fantastic, intense last 12 months you've had.
Well, sure. I had been on Dune. My partner Theo Green and I, we shared the duties as sound designers, supervising sound editors on Dune, part one. And that took close to a year and a half of commitment. And that year and a half led up to winning a BAFTA and an Oscar for our sound design and mixing work on Dune. And that was a tremendous roller coaster ride. I'll tell you one of the reasons why. Of course, it's an honor to win these awards. And sadly, I'm already sounding like a broken record, but the winning is lovely. But what made it extra special is that Warner Brothers and Legendary Entertainment made a big deal out of sound in their promotional campaigns. They promoted the idea that sound was critical to Dune and the success of Dune. And to kind of put their money where their mouth is, they put both Theo and I on the road. And I did 30, 40, 50 podcasts, screenings, Q&As, in ways that you normally see the actors and the directors do. But now sound was a part of that promotion, and it felt like people take us seriously all of a sudden, and the public responded to that. We even got a full color, full page article in the New York Times art section in the middle of March as part of this promotion, because the New York Times, of all publications, a world recognized publication, was interested in sound and how we did it. And that's what felt really good to me, is that somehow we're chipping away and making sound, part of that really core team of creatives, of director, writer, actor, cinematographer, sound designer. That felt really good. So it's been a great year in that regard.
And you mentioned the Oscar and the BAFTA. Are you keeping them hidden?
Well, I actually have them relatively close by. Here is my first BAFTA, hopefully not my last. That's just a gorgeous.
It is stunning. It is stunning.
And it weighs something close to, well, I wouldn't be able to say in stone, but it's got to be 10,000 pounds or something.
Yeah. It looks hefty.
And I have a couple of these guys, the Oscars here, and when I look at them and I hold them and I think, hold on a second, where did these come from? It's a bit of a dream.
Now, the interesting thing, when you look at the awards in home cinema for reference discs, we often use Blade Runner 2049, Mad Max Fury Road.
That's really nice.
Now everyone plays the scenes of Dune. Is it of any coincidence that not only are these films being used as reference for the best audio systems in the world, but the fact that they are award-winning and award nominated, and the bass levels are just crazy? Do we love bass? What's the link here, do you think?
Well, let's just start by saying the through line in those three films, Dune, Blade Runner 2049, and Mad Max Fury Road, is not just myself, but it is also two directors who are committed to making sound part of their storytelling process, and who, unlike most filmmakers, unlike most films, support financially and through scheduling the dedication to sound from the script phase on. Now, for those in the audience that might not understand how this normally works, a film usually is written, cast, shot, edited, and then somewhere very late in the process of developing a film, it is turned over to sound. This is the traditional way. This is the way 99% of all films are made. It is the film now is edited and shot, and it's very close, and sound is now added somehow in what we call post-production. Denis Villeneuve, George Miller, Joe Dante, as we'll talk about, some of the other directors I've worked with, will be the first to tell you that leaves out an entire process of collaboration where sound can inform and influence every decision they make, starting with the script. So I'm saying that those films have been noted for their sound because sound has been made as important as cinematography or screenwriting. And I think that's why people respond to them and play them, because the sound is so inextricably tied to the enjoyment of the movie. It's not an afterthought or an appurtenance. It's integrally woven into it, and that's what makes those movies are great because of sound, and the sound is great because of those movies. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And in fact, our mutual friend Larry Benjamin, I think, shares your view that sound is in fact it's storytelling. And a story is being told within the film, not only visually, but that the sound is such an important part of telling that story that without it, that we're missing something.
Sure. Well, sometimes we're missing something. Other times we are actually adding to the story. Sometimes we can create a story that hadn't heretofore existed. And that's when sound really shines. And that's what we look for, those moments in films. When sound can actually lead the story a little bit. For example, in Dune, a very obvious one would be the way we developed the sound of what we call the voice. I put that in quotations because it's a much beloved story device in the books that Frank Herbert wrote about, and it was critical for us to develop a voice that told you something. So among other things, part of our development of the voice was the research into the Bene Gesserit sect, who they were, what they meant to the culture, how long they had been around. And from those ideas, from the seeds of ideas that Herbert laid in the books, we developed a Bene Gesserit language, which he had not developed. And we developed this concept that through time immemorium, there was a charismatic a leader, a woman who was this source of power, who might have been the person who passed down the skills of the voice. And so we built a story that adds to the narrative of the Dune books, that makes that voice work and makes sound a storytelling component in ways that not was something missing, but was additive, in fact.
Now, I think in terms of what you mentioned before about film production, and now sound is taking center stage along with the actors and the directors and cinematographers, better late than never. What do you think this sets a precedence going forward for filmmaking in terms of how seriously to take sound?
I believe it does, and I can point to some concrete data. One is a lovely gentleman emailed me 2 days ago. He's been following my blog, and if you're interested in sound, you can go to markmangini.com and go to my blog, and I've been writing for decades about sound and art. And this individual had been following my advice. And part of my proselytizing has been, it's not common, but if you can speak with your director in pre-production and sort of get them excited about sound and to support the use of sound during pre-production, production, editing, and then on into post, you're going to do yourself some big favors, and your film is going to benefit from it. And he just wrote me saying, Mark, I did it and it worked. I followed your advice. My director and I started those conversations early on, and that developed into a far deeper and longer lived relationship that started during the creation of the project. And I felt like we're getting through one person at a time.
I think that's absolutely fabulous. And the fact that someone of your caliber, of your experience, who's done such a wealth and variety of films, is able to share that knowledge, and you're so approachable. I think this is invaluable for anyone who's serious about filmmaking, that, the greats are here in front of you. Get in touch with them. And I think that's a brilliant example.
I try to, not that I want to be inundated with contacts. I love meeting people. I love sharing what I know. And I have not only, I have the need to pass on the experience that I have so it doesn't die with me. I feel a responsibility to teach, which is why I lecture so much and I do so many podcasts and seminars and master classes. And it's just, here's the funny thing. Part of my preaching is about the uniqueness of every artist. Every artist brings a perspective. We're all very different. And for that reason, you can ask me anything. You can ask me how I made the sound of a worm or how I made the sound of a spinner, and I will tell you, because I believe the secret of my success is not some behind the curtain thing that I do that I can't tell you about because you might steal it from me. Because if you steal from me, all you do is you steal from yourself. What you've stolen from yourself is an original idea. So I am happy to tell you my secrets because I have none. Because what I know deep inside is that the creative part, the part that made all those movies good, came from somewhere that I can't explain. I am as much an empath as an artist as anything. Sometimes I just wait for the inspiration to come. And when it comes, it's new and it's novel because I thought of it. And then I go and realize it. So it's pretty vital to share all this information. If I can give a young sound designer a technique that I use, great. Happy to do it.
Again, another sign of knowledge, wisdom, and generosity and greatness. So I think the world appreciates that. Talking about some of your mentorship and education, you were invited by the Qatari Film Institute. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that means for the film industry there.
Well, I can only surmise what it means through their reaction to having me, because I was treated like visiting royalty. I mean, I had never been treated like that anywhere in my life. So that was extraordinary. And now the reason I went was that I had done a master class in Mexico City, and I had given away the sound award on their their version of the Oscars. And the person who arranged for me to do that, who knew of me through the worldwide sound community, became one of their developers of their festival. And he remembered me and he recommended me to them and said, have Mark come out. He'll do a good job like he did for us in Mexico City. And so that was quite flattering. And it was a joy to be there. And there was a deep hunger. And it's, I will say that because in some ways it's maybe I wouldn't say a younger film community, maybe perhaps because their industry isn't as old as Hollywood's or, Britain's or, France. There seems to be a slightly more progressive approach to things that seems to embrace more my progressive ideas. Whereas here in good old Hollywood, everybody's kind of doing things the way we've always done them for 100 years. So that was refreshing to see producers and directors responding to these progressive ideas of mine of what sound during production? Are you crazy? You know, they embraced that.
And what was your experience like in that part of the world? Have you been there before, or so give us some of the highlights?
Well, the highlights are again this incredible desire to learn. We've been having talks about some maybe longer lasting relationship where perhaps I might be able to return on a semi-regular basis and teach or lecture or give master classes. That's very exciting. And the one highlight was I had read that near Doha, there's an expanse of deserts where they have these, what they call singing dunes. The sand of certain kinds of sand dunes, there's a certain kind of sand at a certain humidity with a certain kind of movement will emit a very bizarre kind of vocalization that they call singing sand dunes. And I was determined to capture that for the Dune movie. So they made a big deal. They got 3 Land Cruisers and a crew and photographers, and they took me up to the top of the highest dune, and they just did crazy things to trigger. And did end up getting these great sounds of the singing sand dunes. And you know, that's, I'll send you a picture of it. You're welcome to use it. It's a picture of me on top of a 3,000-foot high sand dune with my microphones, and I spent 6 hours in the burning sun, but wow. The time went by like that. I was having so much fun because I was there with interesting people, and I had my recording equipment, and I was doing what I love, which is capturing the sound of the world. That was a really memorable moment.
That sounds incredible. I think wouldn't it have been wonderful if they emulated a worm coming out just to surprise you?
Didn't get quite that far, but I'll tell you, these guys are crazy. To get the dune to emit the sound, you've got to create effectively a sand avalanche. Wow. And the way they did it is they brought up a Land Cruiser to the top, and then they tip it. And I'm telling you, it's like a 45-degree angle. And he'd just crest the dune, and then he'd turn off the engine so I could get good sound. Then he'd take his foot off the brake and bump the brake so it would shove sand down, and created literally an avalanche of sand, clearly dangerous to the driver and the well-being of others around them. But they were determined to make this work somehow.
Wow.
Such beautiful people.
Commitment. And have you been invited sort of anywhere else around the world for lectures and education?
Yeah, I've spoken at Goa at the film festival there. I've spoken in, there's so many, I don't want to leave anybody out. I've been in Paris and in London, spoken many times in London, South Korea, in Seoul, at the Art Institute, Germany at the Cologne Film School there, IFS, International Film School Cologne. I've done a lot of lecturing, and I do a lot of lecturing here at various film schools as well.
So for those who are interested in the UK, do you have any idea of your schedule of when you might be coming back to London, just in case people are interested and they want to book on that?
Currently, no.
Okay, we'll watch this space. If there's any news that we can pass that.
Right. Yeah, nothing currently planned.
And you've been family-wise, congratulations! You just became a granddad.
Yeah, that's a great honor.
What a blessing!
Well, I'm Italian. It's all about family. Yeah.
Which is incredible. And you were, I think, before we started the recording, you mentioned something about involving your family at a young age and some of the sound work that you've done, which is a surprise to me. So I want to share that with the audience.
Yeah. Well, I told my son that my granddaughter, with his permission, will, like my children, like him and his brothers, I want to record the sounds of my granddaughter from infancy through whenever I stop deciding they're interesting. But baby sounds are particularly evocative, and especially infant sounds are particularly evocative. And I've recorded all my kids, and I've used those sounds in movies, including the Gremlins movies, and in Aladdin, and in The Lion King, and in Blade Runner 2049. And that's just, they've learned to live with dad, who is always recording something. My wife loves to tell the stories of waking up at 3 a.m. to a thunderclap, only to find me in my underwear with a microphone out the window, because I just want to capture the next best thunder crack. And this is the life of living with a sound designer.
Wow.
Nothing is sacred when it comes to sound.
That just gives me a vision of Doc with a Marty McFly somewhere.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. I won't go into many details, but I also market sounds through a company here in the U.S. called Producer Sound Effects, and I've just handed over all through the pandemic. I was home alone. My family was in Canada, and I recorded a library of what we're calling body sounds, and I'll leave the rest to the imagination. Nothing is sacred.
And just in terms of young people wanting to get into this industry, or people who may be studying at university in sound engineering and sound design, people who want to get into film and TV production, we know realistically a lot of it is networking and who you know and who you hang out with. Are there any gems of wisdom you can share for people who want to get into this industry?
Gosh, I forgot that you were going to ask this, because for what it's worth, in case I leave out a couple of important recommendations, I've written about this twice on my blog. So if you're a young sound designer or film student or just somebody interested, again, go to markmangini.com, and there's 3 or 4 entries on advice to young filmmakers. So I'll leave it at that. So probably like anything in life, if you want to be really good at something, you need to practice it every day. Like being a director or an actor or an attorney, you have to kind of decide this is what you want to do and commit to it. There's no kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If you want to do this and you want to do it really well, it's a very demanding job. And I would say that the recommendations are, if this is what you want to do, commit to it and do it every day because you love to do it. Here's a good example. All the musicians that I know, guitarists, piano players, trumpet players, they would play their instrument every day, whether they were gigging or getting paid or not. They do it because they love to do it. So while we all should stand up for being compensated for professional work, you need to continue to hone your craft, your art, every single day and prove it by generating something, whether it's to go out and record a sound, some muscle memory to be able to kind of pull yourself up and rethink the whole thing. And that all comes from experience of having done it. So challenge yourself to do things that no one else is challenging you to do, and you will be ready when that call comes.
What wise words for anyone listening there?
I say, do. That's my advice. Do every day.
So there you go, young folk. Now, I know you're incredibly busy, and again, you've been very, very generous with your time, even recording this with me. In your downtime, one would assume that you get to watch the occasional movie or TV show. Am I right?
Oh, of course, yeah. Who doesn't love movies and TV?
And I think one of the great feature films this year is got to be Maverick.
Top Gun.
Top Gun.
Oh, that is so good.
Yeah.
I am normally not a fan of kind of, populist filmmaking, what we call popcorn movies over here. But that just checked all the I didn't care. That just checked all the boxes.
So the interesting thing, when I first saw the teaser trailer, I thought, you know what, Tom Cruise flying an F-18, it's going to sound great. It has to be watched anyway. You'd be crazy not, this is just going to be nuts.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah.
I saw when you posted on Facebook, just a very simple post, that this was great, or something to that effect. I thought, if Mark
It
Mangini
really
says
was.
this is great, I have to see it, because that was it for me. I
Every,
thought, I have to watch this in the
everything
Dolby
about
screen.
it, including the sound work, is
Yeah.
extraordinary. Good luck to them. I'm sure they're going to be on the short list this year
Mm-hmm.
for awards. Really beautifully done. I don't. I know there was a team from Skywalker here in
Mm-hmm.
Northern California, and I believe there's a UK-based team also involved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that came about, but however they did it, it's magnificent. And boy, put that in a good home theater, you'll rock some, you'll rock some seats.
Wow. And nicely timed coming to home theatre. So um, I think films like Dune, like Blade Runner 2049, these are testament to how important the theatre, the cinema is, and particularly in a shared experience in a crowd. Watching Dune on the big screen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something like that's phenomenal. That's the reason why cinema was created now, to love the magnificence of a production like that.
Mm.
When we come to watching these things back at home, and particularly nowadays, with studios like Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime, where
Mm.
feature films are now being produced by the studios and are only available for streaming. And from what we saw in the pandemic, where a lot of people are watching these things at home, um, there's a huge amount of work that goes into production and sound design. I'll give you an example of Stranger Things. There's over 4,000 people that work on that TV show, one of the greatest TV shows ever
Yes.
made from Netflix.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And when I meet people watching these things who have watched the whole series on a mobile phone, it just it really saddens me,
Shame on
because
them.
I know, because when you watch these things and then you hear them properly with the bass levels and the dynamism between silence and
Yeah.
suddenly bang,
Yeah.
and what makes you jump,
Yeah.
then you get the richness of this. And what are your thoughts and feelings, or even experiences, of enjoying productions at home?
Well, I'm trying to look at it from sort of the long view, take the long view, which is that sound has made such dramatic gains in the home in ways perhaps that image hasn't as significantly tracked, and that what we call civilians, the public, I now understand concepts like immersive sound and 5.1 or Atmos or something like that, that there's an awareness of sound and the importance that sound has. That's only going to increase. I would never shame someone for watching Stranger Things or Dune on a phone. Sometimes that's all you can do. I mean, look, I'm an Academy member, and one of the joys of the screeners that we are afforded. In the old days, you'd get DVDs and Blu-rays. Now we can stream them. Is that when you're on location, you can't get to a cinema, and you don't want to not see a great film so that you can vote appropriately. There's a reason for everything. I don't know if the majority of those who consume on a mobile device are aware of the joys they're missing. That's why I'm here to tell you. Go see it in a cinema, or go see it on your home with your sound bar at home. It's gonna be more engaging than what you're gonna get on your mobile device. But there's nothing wrong with consuming on a mobile device. Hopefully, look, I'm involved with a new company here in the United States, out of Princeton University, that's developed an immersive, what we call binaural plus, the ability to hear 360 degree audio from two speakers, meaning a mobile, you could put your mobile device in landscape mode and you could feel surrounds and height and left and right, and you could feel something like you're in the cinema. You'll never be able to reproduce those low frequencies. That's a physics problem that no one has figured out how to get around. But at least we can create some kind of immersive sound field that is more engaging than the little monaural speaker that most people are enjoying. So there's hope for mobile media. But please get to the cinema. You're going to have a great time.
I mean,
or go home and put in a subwoofer. And
yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, subs are magic. That they are the often with sub-satellite systems, the sort of stuff we put in people's homes. I often explain to people that these big black ugly boxes that you can hide nowadays are really, really important for the low bass frequencies. And often people will talk about hearing sound, but in fact, the movies that we mentioned previously, when you're watching the tanker truck turn up in Mad Max Fury Road, when you're in Dune and the ornithopter is right in front of you, you can feel these machines.
Yeah,
and it's not just like hearing; it's like everything's rumbling. My internal organs are rumbling.
It's visceral. You know what's interesting about that, and I've written about this, is that sound, oddly, is actually two senses. You feel sound and you hear sound, and you cannot make that claim with any other sense.
And feeling it, I don't know if you agree with this, but there's certain emotions are evoked, whether it's a cello or a bass guitar or rumbling of a volcano or something. But there is certain emotions which can only really come alive if you feel them internally. Otherwise, you sort of, again, miss something, whether it's frightening, whether it's exhilarating.
Right.
So I don't know what your feelings are or thoughts are about that.
Well, what I love about that is that that is part of the secret, one of the kind of, behind the curtain secrets that sound designers leverage, which is that the use of subharmonic sound is very primal and it's genetic. If you think about it, 100,000 years ago, the only way that you could experience those kinds of deep frequencies is when something truly catastrophic happened, like a volcano or an earthquake or a tsunami. And for very good reasons, for 99,000 years, or 99,900, those sounds are equated with danger. And so we as sound designers can leverage them in a very subconscious way by extrapolating them from that context and using them in other ways. There may not be any danger, but if we can mimic them, it can induce a sense of fear or dread or anxiety, and you can't help it.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think you've had a very, very exciting last few months, and here in London, collect the BAFTA, and you went to the Oscars. I mean, for most civilians who haven't got any idea of, people have maybe been to award ceremonies and things and various dinners and business, but the Oscars and the BAFTAs, this is like Elysium. This is a slightly different culture. Can you share with us what it's like to attend the Oscars or the BAFTAs? Tell us about the vibe.
It's you live in a kind of weird, intoxicated remove. All your problems go away for a day or two because everyone is pampering you. The people that are hosting you are pampering you. You have these lofty thoughts of importance. Oh, look what I did, And so all of that makes whatever those hormones are that make you feel good, serotonin or something like that, is flowing like water. You're just on a big high for me, it was several weeks of I'm arrogant enough to say that Dune won everything it was nominated for, not just Oscars and BAFTAs. And so it was a continual roller coaster of happiness and good feelings for a couple of months, actually, that in it's healthy to experience that. It's also very important to stay grounded and remember this is kind of a fantasy world. I didn't cure world hunger. I only made sounds for a movie. I wish I could cure hunger with my sounds. So I don't want to take it too seriously, but at the end of the day, the big takeaway for me personally was this. I had been a filmmaker all my life. My dad had given me an old 8mm film camera in the 60s and said, I think you probably would like making movies. Why don't you try this? And, so for 60 years, I've been making movies. And it became clear to me around my early teens, the Oscars came on my radar. And all of a sudden I connected that I do that. And that might be the result, that someday somebody's going to give me an award for something because they liked what I did. And I dedicated myself to, I'm going to get one of those someday. And sure enough, it took 40 some odd years, but I made my childhood dream come true. And that makes me one of the luckiest people on the planet, because how many people can say, I made my personal dream come true? And I don't think for a second that it's anything but luck, and a lot of hard work and a lot of skill as well. But I know I'm extraordinarily grateful for this happening in my life, and I feel blessed that it happened to me, and I never forget that.
Wow.
I'll tell you, because of it, this is only a symbol. And the beauty of this, and I learned this, my first Oscar was Mad Max Fury Road. And I learned on Mad Max that the joy of Oscar is sharing it. So I have developed a process on Mad Max and on Dune where as soon as the awards are over, we're out the next day for 2 weeks, going out to dinner every night. And every night we bring this to the restaurant. And the ruckus that it creates, the waiters, the patrons in the restaurant, and I hand it around like, here, you hold it. You give your little speech to me right now. And people are overwhelmed with like just touching the real thing. And that gives me so much joy to see someone like never thinking they'd ever see one of these and now being able to hold one and talk to somebody. And that makes me happy. It doesn't make me happy it's sitting on the shelf. It makes me happy giving it to people and seeing what happens. Whenever we have workers come over the house, they see them. And then we take pictures and talk. That's a joy.
That's incredible. And again, it's a testament to you, your hard work, your passion, your dreams, and your legacy to your children, your grandchildren. But just generally, folks, what an example. And this is how you win. And this is how you celebrate a win. With dignity. I think it's incredible. So going forward in the next few months, obviously, there's some huge projects on the horizon, which everyone is waiting for, which we know you're working on, which we don't need to mention, but everyone knows what's on the horizon. What else can we sort of look forward to from Mark Mangini's world over the next sort of 12 months or so? Is there anything that we need to keep an eye on, other than the obvious?
I think so. I did a really fantastic documentary for Amazon called Good Night Oppie. It's a documentary about Opportunity, the first Mars rover to explore the planet of Mars. Now, that is a beautiful testament. It's as much a doc about science and passion and Mars and space travel and space exploration as it is about family and togetherness and people coming together for a common cause to do something incredible. And the way it's structured is it's built around interviews with the movers and shakers at NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who from day one envisioned, had this crazy idea of putting a robot on Mars, to it actually happening and all the experimentation in between. And it has all the footage taken of the development of the rover. And then you go to Mars for you from the launch through landing through exploration through the eyes of ILM. ILM has done this extraordinary job of 3D rendering what it might have looked like had you actually been there with a high definition camera. And of course, this is all built from the models that NASA gave them of this is exactly what opportunity looked like. Here's what all those mountain ranges look like. Here's what sand looks like on the Martian surface. So everything is gorgeously photorealistic, and you get to feel like you're there watching Opportunity discover Mars and all the problems and the discoveries that happen in the process. And for me, because I'm sort of a geek closet scientist, part of the joy was being able to go to NASA and Jet Propulsion Lab and talk with scientists and find out how they did this and geek out on the details of what motors did you put inside the wheels and how do they turn and how do you tell it to do that, and you're 7 minutes away for communication. So what if it's in trouble? I just got to geek out on all. Anyways, it's a beautiful family movie. It is a G-rated. It's just good for everyone. I think it's going to be great. I think it's premiering at the Toronto Film Festival in early September, due to release end of the year, we hope. So that's something I think really worth looking forward to.
That's fantastic. We'll look forward to that. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I know home cinema is your passion, and that's what you live and breathe every day. So I'm just wondering, because I have a 5.1 sound system here at home, and people are always, I suppose, surprised that I don't have some elaborate Dolby Atmos setup. And I would tell you that because I'm bombarded by sound 9 hours a day on my regular job, when I come home, I don't like to listen to loud sound. So I most often when I watch a movie, unless it's a movie I know that has great sound, I usually listen to it with like the stereo speakers on my TV.
That you know what, that doesn't surprise me at all.
But that's just to protect myself.
Of course, because there's a health hazard warning that should go with, especially the seismic base levels that you like to play with.
Sometimes, yeah.
And I guess it's like, if you're having jumbo jets and Lamborghinis and Bugattis to play around with at work every day, sometimes, you know what, you just want to slow down and turn the engine off.
Yeah. All right, so here's a question for you. It's not so much a question, it's a rhetorical question. When I've had the occasion to read the magazines and the periodicals based around home cinema, I don't do it very often. I'm intrigued by what the new receivers are and what the good equipment is. Reviewers for home cinema, when it comes to the sound section of the review, seem to me to be inordinately obsessed with the surround reproduction. And rather than perhaps review, I don't know, either the overall audio fidelity or, God forbid, the artistic merit of a sound job, every review I've ever read seems compelled or required to talk about what's in the surrounds. And I mention it because here, as a soundtrack creator, we're very cautious about what's in the surrounds, because from a narrative standpoint, if you're hearing something behind you, it's probably distracting you from something you should be listening to in front of you, which means maybe those surrounds weren't as delicately mixed as they should have been. And so I have a concern that the focus is in the wrong place in these reviews. Wait, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because, see, as a gimmick, when you first learn about Dolby Atmos, there's stuff that comes out of the ceiling, wonderful. So let's put on a disc, and I can't wait to hear stuff from the ceiling. And you put on a great film, and there's not much stuff that comes out of the ceiling. Right. Does that mean that it's not a very good Dolby Atmos mix? Or does that just mean that the artists didn't want stuff to come out of the ceiling for these particular scenes for the majority of the film?
It's the latter, I can tell you.
Exactly. So I think there should be a differentiation between, if you want to have a play, what are the best sort of discs and material to demonstrate your speakers during this particular scene, of which it was designed for these sounds to come out of those particular speakers at that time. So it's not about the movie, it's about a few minutes of a particular scene for a moment, because you want to have fun and demonstrate something to your friends.
Yeah, that's always
Hence,
fun.
when we do demos, so Dolby and DTS will often have a demo disc supplied to dealers, where they will pick out particular scenes from films where you can demonstrate. If you want to hear height effects, this particular scene will tell you that. Or they will actually come up with sort of artificial scenarios of listen to rainfall. You put the disc in and it feels like there's rain on top of your head.
Of course.
It's gimmicky, it's artificial, but it gives you this is what this is capable of. Now, when you watch a film like Joker, if you watch it on the disc, which is encoded for front wide channels as well at home, if you don't have a pair of front wide channels, you're not going to hear it. It's simple as that. If you have a pair of front wide channels, you will hear the front wides fire up occasionally during certain moments of the film. Now, and again, it's just the way that the sound design was done. That for these particular scenes, they wanted to have some fun with this, and you'll get to hear them. So again, there's a differentiation between the gimmick and playing for fun, and let's not detract from what the movie's trying to do. So a film like Dune, if you want to test out your bass levels, it's really simple. Put Dune on, or
play anything.
Get Blade Runner 2049, watch the first 2 minutes, and if your house is not rattling, your subs aren't good enough.
That's right.
It's really simple.
That's probably true. It's very true.
If you want to, bass from something else, those other things are not going to give you the seismic bass levels that Blade Runner 2049 intro scene will give you. It's very, very simple. So it's very much how you guys have mixed it, and geeky guys who I want to hear ceiling effects, they'll get those bits.
That what's interesting, this a little bit of technical stuff. We hear in 360 degrees, including in height, although our height acuity, our ability to differentiate, is not as keen with height as it is with horizontal. But if you tilt your head 90 degrees, now you can hear height in an extraordinary way. Nonetheless, all those components add to a sense of what we call immersion, feeling in the midst of something. So while good movies may not have anything you immediately recognize in those overheads, very often what we're trying to do is build atmospheric sounds that are in all of the speakers, because the more points of reference that we can use, including the height speakers and the rear speakers and the far rear speakers, the more points of reference we can create, the greater the sense of immersion becomes. And while you wouldn't think of it while you're watching something, you would have the feeling that I feel like I'm in the middle of something. So we still use those overheads. We're not drawing your attention to them, but we're using them in a much more kind of subliminal way to draw you in.
It's your definition of atmospheric, which is exactly hitting the nail on the head. They're not meant to be directional. They're not meant to detract your focus away from the screen, but very much so create a certain atmosphere, and that's exactly what it's meant to do. And sometimes we have to remind people of that when we put these scene speakers in and they say, I can't hear them. So no, you're not meant to hear just those. But but it's the sum of all parts which puts you in the middle of that, whether it's a concert, whether you're in the middle of a desert storm, and and if you turn them off one by one, then you'll begin to appreciate, actually, you know what, I'm missing something here.
That's the way it works.
So I'm not surprised that you relaxed with a 5.1 setup, because you get to play with quite extraordinary stages of work.
Pretty fun. We work in the best recording studios in the world to create movies like Dune and Blade Runner, Mad Max.
I remember Larry mentioned, I think you were working on stage mixing Dune at some point, and Larry said that walking down the corridors, they knew Mark was working on something because everything was like shaking. It's like, I don't know what's going on in there, but
Well,
Mark's doing his thing.
here's how funny it got. That stage that we were on at my company, Formosa Group, was very new. And this was the sort of biggest sound film that had been in that mixed theater to that point. And the subwoofer in some scenes is so profound that it shook the projector, so that when you hit a big subwoofer moment, the screen would shake. It's because the rattling shook the projector in the booth behind us. And so we had to call in engineering and say, I think you got to put some kind of isolators up there on the projector, because what's coming out of the speakers in front is rattling everything in sight.
Wow. Why does that not surprise me? I think it's such good fun. And again, testament to the fact that, you and your team, winning awards, but obviously winning our hearts, our minds, keeping us engaged, convincing us, and energizing us, so that when we go out to work the next day, we've had a fantastic positive experience because of your creativity, what you've done, what you've shared with us, so that we can go out and try and share that positivity and do what we do best in our other fields. So it's really, really important, and we're all grateful to you for your work.
Thanks. I feel like when we do our job well, especially in a big tentpole movie like Dune or Blade Runner or Mad Max, we try to present the kind of the equivalent of a concert experience. Arrogantly, I like to say, you can go to a museum and you can look at things, beautiful painting and sculpture and artwork. And I would argue you don't come home from that experience with the same profundity that you come home from a great cinema experience, where you've had something beautiful to look at and you have felt something and felt as though you were a part of something. It's like going to a concert. When you feel the music and you hear the music as you watch the artists do their thing, you've really given something to somebody. And I think that's what makes cinema such a uniquely 20th century art form, because of the way it combines sound and image. And you really feel like you got something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. I really feel like I love that experience when I get it in a good cinema, and when others tell me about having had it in a cinema.
And before I let you go, I can see a number of instruments behind you. So do you play, what sort of instruments do you play? And is it just a hobby at home, or do you play in a band?
All of the above. I've been a guitarist all my life. I've played in bands. Now that I do what I do for a living, I can't tour or play in a band. So I'm a solo guitarist and a writer. I've had songs in movies. In fact, I currently have a song in a new episode of the Picard Star Trek series. Punk music, if you can. I had a song in Sex, Lies, and Videotape. A couple of the other Star Trek movies I've had songs in. So I am a guitarist and a hack keyboard player, but I collect instruments. I mean, what you can't. Let me see if I can figure out a way to get all this up. I have in the next room. I have trumpets, tubas, recorders, pan flutes, slide guitars, a sousaphone, a didgeridoo. Hold on, let's just make a little noise here. Here's my didge. So my youngest son Rio and I have had he's a professional piano player and composer, and every Christmas we buy each other a new musical instrument and challenge each other to play it. So last year he bought me this. Let's see if I can. I don't know if I can. So there's a squawk on my didgeridoo.
Fantastic. We need that in Dune too.
It's such a useful tool.
we need to contact Hans Zimmer immediately and say, listen, you're missing a vital band member on stage.
But that's part of the secret sauce is often some of the best sounds that I've made started life as some squawking on a instrument that I don't know how to play, but I figured out how to get an interesting noise out of.
I think that's incredible. Just the multi-talented. I think it's just wonderful.
Well, that's good advice, by the way, for film students and aspiring sound designers, is to polish all those other skills. My musical abilities have been a positive boon to my sound design endeavors. And so you should have some other skills, and music is one of them.
Absolutely tremendous. With that, Mark, oh, by the way, before I leave you, this is just a personal opinion of me, but I don't know if anyone's ever told you whether you remind me of a sort of young Michael Douglas.
I've been told that.
Okay.
It's the gray hair
but
the
better looking.
Oh, please. I wish. My wife still thinks I'm handsome.
Hey, there you go. Well, enough said. Mark, thank you very much. It's been such good fun, and hopefully we're going to record more podcasts. We'll let more exciting stuff come out. We look forward to the new production at the end of the year. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your generosity and sharing everything that you have with the world.
Thank you, Atif. It's been a pleasure. It's really been a pleasure.